to you. Good morning to you. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning to you. Lady Judy, I have some news for you about YouTube. I'm going to have to share it with everybody in just a moment. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. I hope that everybody is doing great and wonderful. If you're a content creator and you got up this morning to use YouTube, you got some surprises. So, in an effort for all of these streaming sites to kind of crack down on the small voice, on small media, YouTube has decided, first they decided that if you have less than 1,000 subscribers, you cannot monetize your content. So even if you're creating original content and having original dialogue and discussion like many small media channels do, such as Black News, you cannot monetize your channel. Now, I woke up this morning and I went to do my YouTube live stream there to accommodate my YouTube family, and they have blocked subscribers who have less than 1,000 subscribed from live streaming. Yeah. So you'll probably hear something about it in the news because I'm sure there are going to be lots of outraged people. Yeah. So I can no longer live stream. You cannot live stream from your own device if you have under 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. And people keep asking me, why am I on Periscope? Because Periscope is not doing all these crazy things that YouTube and Facebook are doing, who are basically in cohorts with each other. So one of the ways that you can help me out is by Monday, helping people to go over to YouTube and subscribe to my page. If I can get to 1,000 subscribers there or past 1,000, then I will be able to live stream again. All right. So if you can help me out with that, I'm also going to put out some things myself. But if you could just tell people to just hit the subscribe button, they don't have to come on every day, right? They don't have to watch every single day, but they're looking at the number, which is really sad because there are people with thousands of subscribers on their page and they don't come on and they don't do live streaming every day, or their content is not really good, or their content is perverse. So they get to stay on YouTube and live stream perversity, and people who are trying to educate, like myself, get booted off of live stream. So again, one of the ways that you can help me all throughout this weekend, just put up my YouTube page and ask people to go subscribe so that we could continue live streaming in real time. Right now I am videoing. I don't know how long my battery is going to last on my phone, but I am videoing. So hopefully once I stop videoing, it'll allow me to upload. But it does not allow me to teach now on YouTube in real time unless I have 1,000 subscribers. So I just want to let you all know that. Those who have been coming on YouTube are probably going to wonder what happened to today's broadcast, but that's what happened. I had no control over it. All right. And if you appreciate what we're doing here and you want to enable us to get more content going and have our own sites and things of that nature, consider becoming a partner. Patreon.com/Daring Dialogues. If we had our own channel, we had our own website fully developed out, these are the things that we could avoid. We could just tell you, hey, go to the website and you can watch uninterrupted. But because we're on public streaming sites, these are some of the things that content creators have to deal with. So let's get started on Healthy, Wealthy, Wise. Today we are talking from the book, The Story of Food, and we are looking at the story of vegetables. We did a little bit on the history of nuts, and we covered some of the nuts, although we didn't do them all. But this is a really big book, so you know we're not going to cover everything in here. But we're going to start out, before we get into specific vegetables and what they do for your body, we're going to talk about vegetables in general. And after that, we're going to go back into the Entrepreneur Playbook and Wealth Can't Wait. So if you're coming in late and you miss the announcements, make sure you catch the replay. I am asking people to put up my YouTube website today, youtube.com/churchlove333, and ask people to subscribe to the page. I have to get to 1,000 subscribers in order to live stream over there, because YouTube just blocked all small business content creators who have under 1,000 subscribers over there. Over here, I have 2,500 subscribers. YouTube, I have about probably 250. So, in order for me to be able to live stream there now, I have to get more subscribers. So this is how the game is played. I could buy subscribers, but then that would be cheating. I actually want real people to go and subscribe to the page. All right, vegetables. Paleolithic humans foraged for vegetables as part of their subsistence diet, but they were nothing like the plump domestic varieties we know today. Instead, most were small and generally bitter tasting. Carrots were scrawny, corn was a straggly grass bearing tiny bundles of kernels in a rock-hard casing, and peas had to be roasted and peeled before palatable. In addition, wild vegetables were often potent and poisonous, so eating them was a gamble. Some beans, for example, were naturally laced with cyanide. Our ancestors had a plant-rich diet. Few plant remains exist from the Paleolithic era. In 2016, however, excavations in one Stone Age site along Lake Hula, west of Israel's River Jordan, revealed more than 9,000 types of edible plants. By examining these fossilized plant remains, archaeologists identified that almost 800 years ago, people living in the area were eating grapes, blackberries, figs, celery, grass seeds, ryerbort, plantains, and even reeds and rushes. Eventually, around 10,000 people made the long transition from this kind of subsistence living to the more settled lifestyle of the Neolithic age. The change was made possible by agriculture, and agriculture was made possible in part by humans learning to fashion more precise, refined tools so that they could till the ground and begin to produce something stable from the ground and not just wait for something to come up from the ground. The beginnings of cultivation. It was from this point on that vegetables as we would recognize them began to emerge. Anthropologists believe that agriculture probably began with the cultivation of wild vegetables. Instead of simply finding the wild forms where they grew and storing them later, people gathered the seeds and planted them in a dedicated place close to their home. As time went on, however, people learned how to create new and improved versions of their favorite crops. They probably first observed natural and genetic mutations, a larger tomato than usual, for example, or a plant that gave a higher production than others, and saved the seeds from these exceptional plants for the following season. Generation by generation, agricultural communities experimented with vegetable varieties, changing them one characteristic at a time. The process of transforming wild plants to the highly cultivated vegetables we are familiar with today took place over hundreds and sometimes thousands of years. Corn cobs, for example, are now 1,000 times bigger than they were in the Neolithic age and contain about 6 times the amount of natural sugars that give them their sweet. One of the main traits of domesticated vegetables was their taste. Wild vegetables would have seemed quite bitter to modern palates, but cultivated versions became far more pleasant to eat, especially the green leafy vegetables such as your salad plants. The selective breeding of vegetables gained pace from about the 17th century onward in line with expanding scientific knowledge on botanical life. However, it was not until the following century that the biology of selective breeding was both understood more fully and the experiments crossing one plant with another to produce a completely different plant began in earnest. Now, if you have read the Old Testament, you know that there are some restrictions in the Old Testament about doing this. I want to say there's like a restriction in there about crossbreeding cotton with wool or cotton with linen, one of those, or wool with linen. And then there's also some dietary things about not boiling your meat in milk. And like, I didn't realize that until I read it, because in when you're cooking, sometimes people will tell you if you want to tenderize your meat more to actually saute your meat in milk. But the scriptures actually tells you not to do that. And I think it has something to do with where the milk comes from versus the meat. I don't know. But anyway, that was one of the dietary things that stood out to me in the Old Testament, because I was actually doing it and I stopped. I'm not saying I'm going to hell because I did it or didn't do it, all right? I chose not to do it, all right? So, one example of this is Franz Archaud's crossbreeding program for sugar beets, conducted from 1786 until around 1820. Archaud, a German chemist with an interest in biology, carried out a systematic selection process on beets used for animal fodder, in which he looked for specimens with a particularly high sucrose content. By continually crossing these sweeter beets, he eventually created a new beet cultivator with consistently high sugar levels than any other type. One of the great selective breeding pioneers was U.S. botanist Luther Burbank, who generated 800 or more new plant cultivars between 1870 and 1920, including the Burbank and russet potatoes. During the 50 years he devoted to his endeavor, he also made improvements to numerous vegetables, from artichokes to celery to squash. Burbank was particularly focused on commercially viable vegetables, and his work laid the foundations for the seed industry giants of the 20th century, who became intent on creating disease-resistant produce. This was achieved through breeding for resistance, as well as growing tactics such as crop rotation and, most controversially, the use of pesticides. In recent years, awareness of the health risks and environmental damage caused by pesticides has sparked an interest in organically grown vegetables and heritage varieties once again. I find it interesting because I look at some of these provisions and I'm just wondering that maybe there was some provisions in scripture against all of this sort of crossbreeding, because maybe God was looking into the future and he knew that man would probably move from plants and animals to humans, because that's where we are now. Now we want to create bionic human beings, and we want to, put in artificial parts and all of that. And next thing you know, we want to do a full computer, a robot with a human brain. This can go some different places, and maybe those provisions initially were about putting guidelines in, ethical guidelines in for human beings, but apparently we're crossing them at this point. So let's take a look at, next week we'll come back and actually talk about some vegetables themselves. Let's take a look at Wealth Can't Wait and pillar number 7. Pillar number 7, oh, pillar number 7. Investing in coaches, masterminds, guides. They have that other M word here, but I'm not going to say it. Investing in coaches and masterminds and teachers and guides. I'll put guides there instead of the other word. Pete Carroll says each person holds so much power within themselves that needs to be let out. Sometimes they just need a little nudge, a little direction, a little support, a little coaching, and the great things can happen. You need coaches. Yes, you. Most people don't have coaches, and most people also don't have what they want in their lives. Just over 10 years ago, Paul had barely heard of someone hiring a business coach or a life coach. If you had 2 soccer teams with identical talent, and one had an amazing coach and the other one had no coach, how would you expect the results to come out? If you think about your child's 2nd grade part-time after-school soccer efforts, and if they're worthy of a coach or not, why would you think your life's results are any less worthy? We think the answer to that is that we somehow see needing a coach to guide us through our lives or through our business or our work as a juvenile effort or as a sign of weakness. Instead, we should just man up or woman up and do what we need to do in order to take care of our business. Here's a secret. All top performers have coaches. So, why does the greatest golfer in the world employ up to 5 people on his coaching staff at a time? Novak, I'm not even going to pronounce his last name. We're going to call him Novak D. Novak D, the number 1 tennis player in the world, just added a 3rd coach to his team. So why do we think it makes sense for the number 1 golfer or the number 1 tennis player and for the 2nd grade team to have coaches, but it doesn't make sense for us? The best accountability partner is a skilled coach who not only holds you accountable, but also brings perspective and resources to the table. Simply hiring someone to hold you accountable will change your results dramatically. The coach is invested because their livelihood depends on the success of their clients. Amen and hallelujah. So, select a coach who knows your area well and your results will skyrocket. Andy Murray, the 2nd rated tennis player in the world, finally won his Grand Slam after hiring Ivan Lendl as his coach. Lendl, once a young, undisciplined, and spotty player with incredible skills but mixed results, hired a coach named W. Fyback. Later in Lendl's career, after he'd become world class, no one remembered the hit-and-miss version of his earlier days. Fyback is single-handedly credited for taking Lendl from the promise of youth to a star who would prefer to crush the life out of his opponents rather than just beat them. During his career, Lendl was not liked. He was feared, and he also won 8 Grand Slams. Good morning. If you were trying to get onto YouTube, I explained earlier in the broadcast what is going on with YouTube. But everybody's been over here, Scope. So you'll have to catch the replay to find out what is going on with the YouTube. Andy Murray, an incredible player who always came up short and had gone to the finals all too many times without winning a Grand Slam. Then he hired Lendl as his coach. And within 2 years, he won both the U.S. Open and Wimbledon, becoming the first Brit in 77 years to win. Murray always possessed the skill, but he gives much of the credit for his added toughness by hiring Lendl as his coach. If coaching is closely linked to the outcomes of the top sports players in the world, as well as 2nd grade soccer teams, Your career and life are more important and important enough to warrant an excellent coach. So, take the first step. By asking around and doing a little research, you will find the right person to motivate you and help you succeed. If the coach doesn't prove helpful, you can easily make a change. In our opinion, nothing brings more purposefulness to your life and business than hiring and paying for someone whose sole responsibility, at least during their call or their training session, is to hold you accountable and facilitate your success. Your life is worth that level of purposefulness. So, get outside help. Hire a consultant, a coach, or just ask a smart friend to chat with you about best practices for your business. You are doing things the way you're doing them because you think it is the only way or the best way. That's okay. Now, get some outside eyes to help you better ways to focus your efforts on what matters most. You need life guides. One of David's greatest blessings as an entrepreneur has been the coaching and guide he has received throughout his life. One role model was a man destined to be a billionaire named Gary Keller. Gary is a natural teacher, and early in David's business career, nothing influenced him more than the insights that he received from Gary. Gary's commitment to learning, to setting goals, and taking action has had a huge effect on David's business success. And taking action has had a huge effect on David's business success and the more. Even more importantly, he had the opportunity at an early age to be around an individual with a mindset of abundance. This is important because if you are around people whose mindset is limited, if you're around people whose mindset is saying you can't do it, or it's not possible, or they don't have alternatives to offer you, if you're around the mindset of a person who does not believe that with God, all things are possible, you're going to be limited. All right? Think about and look at the company that you currently keep. The effect that experience has had on his own thinking has been huge. When David was only 15 years old, his mother became the seventh agent to join Keller Williams Realty. Gary was actually young himself at age 26. Over time, the company would become the largest residential real estate company in the world, and it was David's mom's success with Gary that would eventually open the door for David to launch his business career. So as I was saying before, when we first began this book, that you have to look at this book in terms of two white males giving you advice on wealth building, all right? Which I'm glad he said this because it goes back to connections and having people who are already building wealth, who can guide you, who can coach you, and who can show you the ins and outs of a business. Many times, African Americans do not have this. So we have to create our own. And when we create our own, we are responsible, ethically responsible, community-wise responsible for going back and helping other people and guiding them through the process and coaching them through the process. Oftentimes, we're not doing this enough. And so you're looking at our community as a whole and you're saying, why aren't there more people in the field of XYZ? It's because we need more people doing what this man did. He was grabbing this guy at an early age, middle school, high school, and he began training him and developing him so that he could be in the position that he's in today. After he graduated college, worked in corporate America, then sold everything to hitchhike around the world for 2 years, David began for his mother in real estate as her assistant while he looked for a quote-unquote real job. It's funny how so many people end up where they professionally need to be by default rather than by design. Joining the Keller Williams team when he did allowed David the opportunity to not only work with his mother, but to be taught and mentored by Gary personally. So, first lesson, lead with revenue. If you spend less than you earn, you can keep your business going indefinitely. Lead with revenue, Gary told him. Never let your expenses get ahead of your revenue. What Gary was saying was that you cannot count on running any business for long if your outflow exceeds your inflow. So at the end of the day, you should always lead with revenue. If you spend less than you earn, you can keep your business going indefinitely. Too many people let their expenses get ahead of their revenue. The discipline required to lead with revenue and to have your expenses follow your success rather than throwing cash at the problem will serve any entrepreneur for a lifetime. This is, don't bite off more than you can chew. If you know, for example, if you're an author, all right, and you're a writer and you're just starting out, this is why I have a whole course on how to get into the ebook publication area. You need training for that, all right? If you are an author, I'm going to tell you up front, and you're publishing your own work and you're not going through a publishing house, you need at least $5,000 to $10,000 to fully actually get started from start to finish. This because I've done it over 20 times now. All right, both for myself and for others. So if you know that you don't have that in savings, right? Or you know that you don't have that in retirement that you can pull from your own investment money, right? You need somebody to help you figure out, how can I get started? How can I publish without spending that amount of money? And I'm talking about hardcover publication, where you have a physical book, where you do marketing, where you do promotions, where you do interviews, paying for all of that, your publication fees, your copyright, all of that tied in together. Because it's not just enough to write a book. You also need to know how to market the book. You need to know who you're supposed to be sending the book to. You need contacts in certain areas so that you can go out and promote your book through interviews. You're going to need monies for if you want to do a professional book signing. So if you don't have that cash on hand, then there are ways to get into publishing and not necessarily start there, where you're going to need that amount of monies to get started. And that's why people hire coaches to help them get started without having to spend that initially. You need to see, is what you're selling actually marketable? Your story. And so those are some different things, even in that you have to think about. So when he talks about leading with revenue, you have to, even as the word says, count up the cost before you get started, so that you don't get halfway in the middle of a project and you can't finish it. Maybe you don't have enough to pay your editor, or maybe you don't have enough to pay your marketing or your publicist team, or maybe you don't have enough to pay a graphic designer to give you a really good book cover design, because that's the first thing that people are going to see before they pick up your product and want to open it up. So you have to think about all of those pieces. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't think about all those pieces, and they just go out there gung-ho with a lot of well wishes. And then when they get disappointed, it's not good. Second lesson, set a vision for you. In 1994, Gary was teaching a class on goal setting that he calls Quantum Leap. At the time, there were roughly 20 other students who took the class with David. Gary passed out a handout with the following question: if you were to meet me here in 2 years, what has to happen for you to look back on your life and say, the last 2 years have been amazing because ... There were 24 lines to fill in with things to accomplish over the next 24 months. It was a difficult exercise for David. He had taken some classes here and there, but overall he was not an avid goal setter. So he ground his way through the exercise, eventually coming up with 20 goals that he thought were pretty cool. Some of them he thought of previously, but most of them he made up during the exercise. After the class, he took the piece of paper home, shoved it in his desk drawer, placed it mindlessly in his for later pile. Time passed, and soon he had forgotten about the exercise. His daily routine remained the same. About a year later, he was clearing out his desk drawer, which was now full of for later in life papers, when he came upon that gold sheet. And he was surprised to find that he had accomplished about half of the 20 items on that list without even thinking about them again. That was an epiphany for him. Now, if you've never done this, I encourage you to do it. I did it a couple years back, and as my husband and I were moving to our brand new house this year, I found a paper very similar to this where I had written down some things that I wanted to get accomplished, and I looked on the paper and 2 of them were already done. But I had forgotten I even wrote them down. So guess where that paper is now? It's on the side of my refrigerator. This was an epiphany for him. If he got 10 out of 20 of the things done without even looking at the list, he said to himself, how many could I get done if I actually paid attention to it? Encouraged by the success he had from those creations of the mind, David wondered what would happen if he devoted himself more purposefully to creating a future of his choosing, a life by his own design. From that moment forward, David became an avid goal setter, and he's never looked back. He's become someone who achieves a lot of his intentions every single year, an individual who hits the mark he sets far more often than not, and a man who has built an amazingly rich life in the areas of importance to him: health, wealth, and adventure. One of the key reasons for this abundance is that he sets 30 to 40 large goals every year and completes about 80% of them. He has a vision for his life. If you don't have a daily agenda, the first person you meet each day will give you theirs. I'm going to say that again. If you don't have a daily agenda, the first person you meet every day will give you theirs. This is why I try not to check my social media early, because somebody is usually giving me their agenda for the day. And I have an agenda for the day that I have to meet. And so if I have time to answer a question, I will. If it's a question that takes research or further consultation, I'm going to tell you to email me for a consultation. Why? Because if you don't have a daily agenda, the first person you meet each day will give you theirs. Gary Keller said that, and it's very true. He says it all the time. It ties into goal setting. If you're not purposeful in your goal setting, you will not have a daily agenda. And if you don't have a daily agenda, you'll most likely be aimless. If your day is aimless and you encounter someone whose day is aimed with purpose, there's a great chance that you'll just start achieving their purpose and not your own. If this happens enough over time, you can begin to understand the concept of a quiet life of desperation. Many times, and I found this to be true spiritually, when you're talking about spiritual leadership, many times people's own life purpose, if they don't have a goal set, many times their life purpose gets absorbed into their spiritual leader's purpose. And I'm going to leave it right there. And sometimes you think that that's the will of God when it may not necessarily be the will of God for you. It may be that your leader saw that you were aimless and had no goals in life, and your life became absorbed into serving their purpose. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you were supposed to do, but that's where you wound up. Okay? So, being authentically purposeful with your goals and agenda each day will unquestionably make your life more fulfilling, because you will attract people, you will attract work, and you will attract activities that are in alignment with your purpose. One more time. You will attract people, you will attract work, and you will attract activities that are in alignment with your purpose. In the last year, I have met more people and been in contact with more people who are in alignment with my purpose of educating and empowering my people specifically than I have in the last decade. Why? Because I have specific goals, I have a daily agenda, and the more that you have that agenda, you will attract people, work, and activities that are in alignment with your purpose. So we're going to stop there, and we will continue on next week with Pillar 7, which is telling you and talking to you about the importance of having a coach, a life guide, someone who is helping you to develop. Last book for today, The Entrepreneur Playbook by Leonard C. Green. Proven, keyword, proven strategies, tips, and techniques to build a successful business. So both of these books have been talking about the 80-20 Pareto principle, right? Where 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work. We're on the chapter in here right now. Work hard. You'll be amazed at how many people don't. And we put a caveat there that hard does not necessarily mean that you are busting your butt, that your eyes are bloodshot. No. Most of the time, it actually means being smarter about what you're doing. And as the other book talked about, being focused on accomplishing your specific goals. So he has a section here about how do you motivate the other 80%, right? If you have people in your life that are committed to you, you have people in your life that are in conversation with you often, you know that those are the 20%. You know that these are people who believe in you, who believe in your product, your good, your service. They're behind you all the way. They are pushing for you. They want you to thrive. They want you to succeed. They want everything around you to prosper. Those are your 20%. All right? If these are the people who in digital land, these are the people symbolically who are putting up the balloons on your page. Anybody know that little icon where it's like the I forget what it's called, where it's like the blower and it's got the little confetti coming out the end of it? Those are the people who are cheering you on every single day, right? That's your 20%. Then you have 80% who they like you, they're okay with you, right? But they're not checking in with you. They're not checking in with you every day. They may not be checking in with you every month. They might check in with you once a quarter, okay? Or they might check in with you yearly for your birthday. They might stop by your page and say happy birthday, and then you don't hear from them again for another year, all right? We know realistically that we're not going to mean, or we're not going to have the value that we want to have in everybody's life at the same level or the same degree. And you should be okay with that. You really should. Everybody is not going to be fawning over you. Everybody is not going to be thinking that you're amazing and incredible. But you should have at least 20% of the people in your life who do. I'm just saying. Okay? So, he has a question here. How do you motivate the other 80%? Whether it's in work, whether it's in relationships, etc. We're talking work right now. He said, I said having 80% of your workforce only doing 20% of the work is okay if you're getting maximum effort out of that 80%. So how do you do that? The onus is on you if you are leading. You need to get them to be a part of the team and involved and wanting to do something greater than themselves and or to perform better than they ever have before. You have to make them understand that nothing great was ever produced by being lackadaisical. Think about the best leaders of all time, whether they were in sports, John Wooden at the UCLA, the military, George S. Patton, or business, Herb Keller. They each got people to achieve more than they ever thought they could. I know that is my goal, whether I'm leading a company or whether I'm teaching. I tell my students that my classes will end up being the most demanding that they have ever had, but I promise them that the hard work will be worth it. They'll probably end an idea that will lead to a successful business. I'm serious about the hard work. For my 8 a.m. class, we lock the classroom doors precisely at 8 o'clock. Other professors may let you come in late, but I don't. If you try to sneak in the back door, your classmates will boo you. Typically, a student will spend as much time on homework as he or she does in class. If the class is 3 hours long, homework takes about 3 hours. For my courses, the homework portion could be double or triple the class time. Whatever it takes to come up with the best out-of-the-box solution is the time you need to spend on the case we're examining. Because 75% of your grade is based on the answer to your question posed in the case. To persuade my students to do all that work, I need to prove to them that not only is it worth it, but that they'll be better people for doing so. If I can't, no one will buy in. Demonstrate that it is. By being prepared, by my work ethic, and by bringing other successful entrepreneurs into the class to speak with my students, many of whom are former students who reinforce my philosophy for success. You need to be constantly getting better. Jack Welch, the former CEO of GE, said, "You should always upgrade your workforce every year by firing the bottom 10% and replacing them with better people." So, if you've ever been in a workforce before and all of a sudden you got a pink slip for no reason, it's possible that somebody considered you the bottom 10%. Which is why, if you are in any kind of 9 to 5, you do not want to be around the people who are consistently known as barely getting by. Just a tip for the 9 to 5ers. Move yourself away from the people who are just getting by, who are just doing the bare bones of their assignment, because those will be the first people cut from a position. You're not going to do this in a vacuum. You're going to work with that bottom 10% and see if they can get better. But if they can't, or if you can find someone who can perform the work substantially better, you will need to let go of the people who are not as good. There are 3 reasons why. First, if you don't, you are sending a message to the rest of the staff that less than stellar performances are okay. Second, they're probably going to be happier working somewhere else where their performance will be in line with everyone else's. And third, if you don't upgrade, you're going to fall behind your competition who will upgrade. So, memo to employees. I believe in being totally honest with employees. There is no advantage in not being so. Part of that honesty is explaining to them what is expected and how they will be evaluated. Here are 3 points I think it is incumbent on you to explain to the people who work for you. Number 1, remember that your efforts mean nothing to your employer unless they help to the goals. You're not being paid for trying. You're actually being paid for accomplishing. Number 2, your company employs your labor if and only if it prefers it to anything else that it could do with its money. And that includes the labor of any other employee. You have really no right to your job. And number 3, your value to your employer depends solely on their ability to derive gains from your labor. By gains, we don't just mean monetary profits, but also everything else that matters to their organization. All right? So, Is there such a thing as work-life balance? A lot of people talk about it, and a lot of people say there is no such thing as work-life balance. Okay? He says here, I know this will make some people cranky, but I believe it completely. Being the best at something requires hard work, a lot of time, and devotion. If you're going to be putting in all that effort, everything else in your life is going to be affected. There's simply no way around this fact, and that means there is no such thing as work-life balance. But he does give a caveat, which we're going to get to in a moment. When I say this, some people, invariably people who are passionately devoted to one thing, such as building a company, becoming a world-class musician, or having the world's prettiest garden, agree with me. As for others, their responses tend to fall into three categories. 1, you're wrong. 2, having my life be that far out of balance is not for me. And 3, I will find a way around the problem. So let's take them one at a time. To people who tell me I'm wrong, I always respond, you may be right. So, to show me the error of my ways, give me the names of 3 people that you know, or 3 people you have read or heard about, who are extremely high achievers, who don't spend a disproportionate amount of time working on what they're good at. To this day, nobody has been able to come up with 3 names. And as for me, it's not for me, that's more than fine. I understand that people balance in their life. If they can find it, if it makes them happy, then I'm all for it for them. They just need to recognize that it will dramatically decrease their chances of becoming a high achiever in any one area. That is not criticism, that's simply a matter of fact. Finally, can you find your way around the problem? You can certainly try. For example, let's say you have what I think are the mutually exclusive goals of being the world's best success in commerce, whatever type of commerce you have. You know it's going to be hard, but you are committed, and you decide you're only going to work from home. This will give you the maximum amount of time you can spend with your children. You get up every day at 4 or 5 so you can get a bunch of work done before you have to get to your children and get them ready for school. You pay complete attention as you make them breakfast, get them organized for their day. Once they're out the door, you work as hard as knowing that your workday will come to an end once the school day does. There are sports practices to get to, extracurricular practices to attend, and homework to help your children with. Then, maybe after you have made them dinner and tucked them into bed, you work a bit more, grab a few hours of sleep, and repeat the entire process again. If you follow this course, have you achieved balance? Well, you have done it as well as can be done, but you're still putting a limit to the upside of your career, not to mention you're probably not taking care of your personal self. You won't be able to manage people, and work-related travel will be difficult or impossible. Because of these limitations and others that are implicit in child rearing and the choices you've made, you're probably going to be surpassed by people who can devote more time to their career, who don't have children, and who can travel. There's absolutely nothing wrong with your choice if this is the life that you want. Just understand the limitations. By the way, Jack Welch agrees with my analysis and goes one step further by calling it the work-life choice. Then he says this, but I found the solution. If you want to have work-life balance, have a supportive spouse. And I'm going to take a sip of juice right there. Because there are people who actually believe, because I've heard this several times, there are people who believe that as a single, they can get more accomplished as a single than they could as a married person. Somebody has drilled this into their brains that if they get married, then they're going to have less time, or if they get married, it's going to come at the detriment to whatever business they're building, which I've actually found to be Not true. And he's going to tell you his story. But when I got married, actually doing 1,000 times more as a married person than I ever did as a single. And I was a really busy single. All right. So he says this: I think there's actually a way to achieve work-life balance. Have a spouse or partner who does all the things you don't. I am very fortunate that my wife did the vast majority of child rearing and to this day runs 100% of our household. She's extremely supportive of me and is an honest sounding board for all of my ideas. Here's a quick example of how this played out. Back when I was working for one of the major accounting firms, Deloitte Touche, I'd leave the house before the kids got up for school and did not get back home until 8 p.m. To make sure we had a semblance of a normal family life, she would feed the children snacks in the late afternoon so that we could have family dinner together the moment I walked in the door. Obviously, the only way this kind of arrangement works is if both people are completely devoted to the roles they're going to play. When you're married, and especially before you get married, and hopefully you're in some kind of premarital counseling, you should be discussing the roles you will play. Who's going to do what? Who's going to be responsible for what? If that has to be in reverse, or if something adverse happens financially, how will those roles change? These are conversations that you should be having. All right? Does this mean women executives should pair up with a house husband? Even though women, especially women who are mothers, are better as a rule than men at multitasking, my answer would be a resounding yes. I found the only way work-life balance truly works is by dividing things between two people and having two people in agreement with the roles they are going to play to make work and life work. There are limitations no matter what option you choose. I was a good provider and I like to think I was a wonderful father, especially on family vacations, and I don't regret anything. However, I would be lying to you if I feel a twinge of discomfort when my son said to my grandchildren, "You're blessed that Grandpa is attending most of your games because he never went to all of mine." So, we're going to stop here for today. This is a very good stopping place. I'm going to go ahead and upload to my YouTube channel. Wow. Those of you who have a comment, if you have a comment or you have a question, if you can tap the two smiles,